Okay, feet down, just sit up in your chair. Get ourselves going, rubbing your hands together. Pad your fingers very lightly, and covering your face. And then over your head and neck. One shoulder, and your arm. The other side. So the upper part of your chest. Right on your belly. Okay. So the little tapping that we start with, like everything else really, could be seen to have a sort of dual aspect to it. One which is physical, just to sort of warm you up and to wake you up a little bit. The second is as always this focusing of our attention into our body in one way or another. The latter being one of the key elements that we bring together into the whole art. And as always, the opening stages of the class, the tapping, this posture, and the joint rotations really do go through those different components, those different ingredients that gradually blend. The blending process is part of the ongoing practice, really. So with this one, principally again, the thing that we're looking for is twofold. One is the focusing of our attention, but in particular, the focusing of that attention on this feeling of dropping back, the rooting down. This is a process of yielding, of allowing gravity to work through our body. So we're no longer concerned with having to sort of predominantly strain to hold ourselves up, to hold a posture, to hold a position, but rather allow, in the first instance, this releasing feeling. We can just sort of flop back, which is really what we do in this posture. And then when we move from this to the more upright stances, then we also begin to be able to adjust our structure to allow that rooting down and to support us in the correct way, so that we don't just instantly sit up and tense up again. So get that feeling of almost melting into the chair, kind of draining feeling, dissolving. Again, many different ways of labeling the experience, and whichever way of labeling actually helps you to access that experience. You may want to focus on your breathing a little bit, looking for that feeling of your in-breath starting with an expansion in your belly. Just a very small movement there, which then rises up into your solar plexus and finally your chest. Any other effects of this sinking down and release of tension and tightness, stiffness in the body, tightness in the body will constrict the amount of space for movement and will impair movement. If you think about sort of certain parts of the body, like the center of the body, you've got big muscles going in all directions and kind of crisscrossing over each other. If they're tight against each other, they're not going to be able to function as easily. And we certainly won't get any sense of movement, of energy in that particular area. And if it is in the center of the body, that would be like a break in the connections through the whole of the body. So we'll also lose that feeling of the whole body moving as one unit. So bringing your feet in, coming forwards. So that last bit, the connections in the body, the idea that when we move one part of the body, other parts of the body are part of that movement, can be explored in the joint rotations in quite a simple form. So as you start, you turn your head a little bit from side to side. And obviously, you know, we're thinking neck, shoulders, but you just pay attention to what's going on in your body. You'll start to feel movement down your spine, maybe spreading out across your upper back a little bit. The trapezius muscle covers the whole of that area. That's one area. That's one part of the body that will be involved in the movement, but others as well, maybe down to your chest, maybe in your sides. And as we become aware of these things, there was also a bit of a switch, so that we involve those areas more in the movement. They're not just random or kind of excess movement. We can actually start to use, say, for instance, the trapezius muscle, the energy in that area to help to move our head. So it's no longer an isolated movement. Place your hands in front of your chest, and when we do this, the circling back, we also begin to become aware of movement in chest and upper back, maybe in your sides as well. And wherever else you feel it, don't wait for me to tell you where to feel the movement. Try and pay attention, keep your attention engaged in your body and observe what is going on. Going forwards. Hands down to your sides, that is a round pillar either side of your body, rotating your arms. And again, feel what's happening in chest and upper back, and begin to get the feeling that those are the movements that create the movement in your arms. So gives you a stronger movement, one that requires less effort on any one part of your body. And so contributes to the very flowing quality that we associate with Tai Chi. And then raising your hands. So because we're beginning to use more than just one isolated part of our body, a certain quality of strength begins to come through as well. Back the other way. Rest your hands. Now, looking forwards a little bit, so more of your weight goes into your feet, and then you're using your legs to push yourself back. So a couple of things to just note here. One is that your weight can move. It's not just there in a kind of inert way, that here, when you go back, more of your weight pushing down through hips and buttocks, lower back. When you go forwards, more of your weight pushing down through your feet and your legs. Using your legs to push yourself back to the upright position, and then going forwards again with a little push from your hips and lower back. The other part of your body that you will use, particularly in the withdrawing movement as you come to the upright, is your hips and lower back, dropping down like somebody's sitting behind your chair, just pulling you back into the chair. All of these factors contribute to bringing your head and shoulders to the upright position. And in doing so, take away some of the need for straining in shoulders, neck, upper back, those areas where we habitually try to pull ourselves upright. And that has quite a significant effect on the quality of our movement. Then you turn a little bit. So now you go down more towards one leg. And then turn to the other side. So we can feel a difference between different parts of the body, principally feet. And when you move the weight into one foot, the foot and the leg that the foot is joined to are said to be full. And the other one would be empty. And this becomes a major, if not the major, driving factor for all of the movements. And in turn, so your weight goes across to the other leg, and then push so you go back into the hip, turn, move through the movement across your hips and forwards again. That whole movement, drawing your head and your shoulders around in a small circle. An exercise that helps us to realize the significance of this part of the body between hips and waist in guiding the movement, shaping the movement. Change direction by changing the way you're turning in your hips and waist. And then coming back to the central position and shifting across slightly so you can raise one heel and step out, pull back, step out, and pull back. And on the other side, good. So the saying in Tai Chi is well, there's two to think about in relation to what I've just been taking you through. One is we say that when one part of your body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. What that really means is your whole body is somehow engaged with what's going on. Obviously, some bits are still, but those bits are still active in the sense that they're quite often playing a crucial supporting role. The other saying is that the movement is rooted in the feet, with this feeling of sinking down, transmitted through our legs. In the seated exercise, I would say through sort of the hips and buttocks as well. Controlled, directed through the center of the body, and just as we saw when we turn here, everything else changes. And finally expressed in the arms. So the arms pick up on the movements that have already been made and, if you like, offer them some kind of shape. And let your hands drop down and see if you can just retain an awareness of those different components, those different ingredients in the back of your mind as you're focusing more on the whole exercise that you're doing. So There's a kind of dual awareness going on, I suppose you could say. Just settle back, turn your hand palm forwards, ease forwards, and rotate your arm. Bird forwards its wings. So at the moment your arms are hanging straight down from your shoulders. Now when we change to fisherman cast a net, we leave them behind slightly so they begin to swing. So the weight of your arms swinging from your shoulders, still your weight moving from one foot to another. That movement generated a chain of events that finishes in your fingers. So you know your weight moving, your pelvis tilts forwards, that draws your shoulders forwards, your shoulder draws your elbow on your wrist on your fingers. Try not to overextend. The further your arm gets from your body, the more likely you are to sort of slip and slide about. So see if you can get that sense of movement within your body. Hopefully you felt it in different parts of your body, in those connections in different parts of your body a few moments ago. Now just see if you can observe them working through the whole of your body. And then, so I'm leaving your arms out there. So as you sit back, they come over, so you're rolling the ball in towards your chest. Arms remaining quiet, but obviously they're part of the movement, but in a sense they're the finale to the movement, shall we say. We can get a better idea of how that works if we can just quieten the arms down. Stop them leading the movement. Drawing your arms apart, pigeon spreads its wings, chest opening and closing, back closing and opening. So by using those big muscles, you're taking some of the strain away from the shoulders and your arms, retaining the quality of the movement. One more time, coming back, dropping your hands down. Before we go into pushing away, turn your hands palm up. Let's go forwards and backwards with an idea, an image that you're carrying something, carrying a tray of drinks in your hands, say for instance. So imagine you've got a tray of drinks, there's a table in front of you, you want to put the drinks on the table. You'll be reluctant to just sort of do this, to sort of thrust your arms out. You'll start to spill the drinks. So what we actually have here is something that's quite active happening through our arms and our hands, a definite task, a definite idea. And yet at the same time, it's a task that requires a certain stillness, a certain steadiness, shall we call it, with our arms. And that's very much characteristic of Tai Chi. But now turn your hands palm forwards and go into the exercise, pushing away, retaining that quieter quality in your arms. And when we can do that, when the arms are less dominant and a bit softer, it helps with this awareness of what else is going on within the body. It helps our perspective to broaden, because it's not only our arms that would be, in a sense, overactive, but because of that, our attention resting on our arms would be overactive, leaving less space for other things to be noticed. Do one more of these. Weight still moving forwards and backwards. The hands flatten out. A loose fist. Should be able to get your finger down the middle. And your hands just slightly above your legs. As you sit back, hands are slowly drawn in towards your hips. Your elbows will go out slightly. One more time. Open your fingers, turn your hands palm out. Try and remember that feeling of your body working but not straining. Weight moving, we practiced that earlier. Your arms and your hands following what your shoulders are doing. The shoulders will, in a sense, be taking their instructions from what hips and pelvis, the center of your body, is doing. This time, turning your hands palm down, turn in the center of your body, go forwards in the direction you just turned towards, swing around and back. Another circular movement. Now reverse that, go in the other direction. This is polishing the table. We can see here very clearly how what's happening here in the center of the body. When I turn, that's when my hands are directed into a change of direction. When I roll forwards, the pelvis tilts forwards and the shoulders follow. That pushes my hands in and out. And then your hands turn palm up as they rest in your lap. Now we push down, same connection, a little bit more obscure, pushing your hand up and then drawing it down. So your feet pushing down, your hip pushing down, your back lengthening and contracting. So another component we can begin to become very aware of here, quite a simple exercise, is the rhythm that runs through the movement. It's not always this regular, but with this one, it's in-breath. Sorry, not in-breath, it's expansion. Could be an in-breath, I meant to say. And then a contraction, expansion, contraction. Change with the same kind of feeling, but your arms a little bit out to your sides, the wild goose. One more time. And then parting the cloud, easing forwards, letting your hands cross. Sit back. Good. Now, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Pushing up on one side, expanding and contracting. Another element that we can notice, and this is a progressive thing. What I'm about to say isn't something that is necessarily obvious from the start. It's something that our awareness grows, we can become aware of, which is this idea that there are punctuation marks. So I used to call them pauses. I think the idea of punctuation is a better idea. You know, if we see a comma or a full stop, we know how that sort of affects how we read and how we hear the word, the sentence. And in the same way, there are regular punctuation points. Here, we just wait, we let our attention scan across, and then on the other side. It's a little bit exaggerated, but the idea is to stop a syndrome where we get to about here and the other hand's already started. One more time on each side. Now, pushing in two directions. So here, again, those little punctuation points. Particularly important is the one here, where we just let our hands rest for a moment before we try and push out again. But we also rest a little bit here, and then we feel say for instance, our elbows dropping in. Because when you push your arms up or out, there's a response in certain muscles. Here we feel a lengthening. And the first thing, when we're here, first thing we experience is a contraction in the back. You can't see, but it creates a pull downwards. Likewise here, broadening of the back, it starts to contract, drawing your hands in. There is also, if you can notice it, slight pressure downwards through hips and feet on each expanding stage. This time, as you push out, turn in. in your hips, bringing back in that turning in the center of the body. We want to get to a point where those different aspects, those different ingredients are very much blending with each other. But it's hard to develop that if you don't know what you're trying to blend, if you see what I mean. Do one more round of this. Remember, it's the center part of your body between hips and waist that guides your arms and your hands into different directions. So as we turn in one direction, arms are pushing out to the sides, but if you're looking at it from above, you'll see the arms pushing out diagonally because they're still pushing straight out from the shoulders. Extend one foot, just the heel on the foot, knees slightly bent. Now just tilt a little bit further forward. Make sure you've got the support from the foot that's flat on the ground still. Just scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Good, and then changing once again, fist in your hands, dropping back into your hip, grasping the tiger's ears. Good. Change sides. Good, and then grasping the tiger's ears. One more. Good, and then come back and settle. So right the way through the system, there are these moments of what I variously described as stillness, settling. Punctuation is perhaps a better way of thinking of it, because we're not totally still, of course, and quite often those are points where we would expect to have other things going on, like say the turning in the center. We'll come back to that aspect when we're doing the standing. But for now, again, just rubbing your hands together, preparing to stand. So light but rapid over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Again, your arm. And the other side. Light on your belly. Finishing with your legs. Good. Sit back and pushing your knees up, feeling calves, thighs, maybe even your hips a little bit, working a little for this. And then going around in a small circle with your knees, feeling the movement back into your hip joint. And back the other way. Rest down. So if you're going to stand, you can stand now. I'm going to move my chair out the way so that I don't keep bumping into it. But as always, using the chair, using some kind of support can be a very useful thing to do, especially when we are investigating the various components. It's important to try and get these as correct as possible. It's a crucial element in the Tai Chi forms where if you miss something, then it's like you've been reading a set of directions to get somewhere and you've missed a line, and everything that comes after is much more difficult at that point, if not impossible, because there simply aren't. There are other options if you say, well, you've got to go from A to B to C. It isn't quite so crucial with the individual exercises, although with the more complicated ones, it can easily get that way. It's also very good training for your awareness to really focus, and that's one of the things that helps to produce this very deep sense of stillness and calm that we begin to associate with the whole art, really. So, if, say, for instance, you want to practice, maybe just pushing your foot out and placing it in the right position, and so on and so forth, or you want to get a sense of, well, what's happening, what muscles are you using, and so on and so forth. Using something for support is actually very useful there. It's not simply something that we do if we're having trouble standing, or we're a bit wobbly, and we want that support, although we can use it like that. It's another tool that we can use to aid this developing awareness and an awareness of almost of a kind of complexity, or of a multitude of things happening that stays with us while we're doing the particular exercises. So let's do the first three exercises, rooting down, wild goose, parting the clouds, as a little sequence. So sink down, bring your hands around, pushing up. Coming back to the starting point here, and this is where we get that punctuation. Hands come out, and we push up into wild goose, taking time to come to once again that punctuation point and then parting the clouds. So another factor here is that it stops us rushing. What can often happen, particularly when we start to string movements together in this way, once again a punctuation point here, is that we start to rush. You know, we get halfway through a move that, oh, I'm going to do that. This just helps you to slow down, to complete the movement. So again, this sense of stillness that abides within the movement becomes more obvious to us. One more round. And shake out. When we apply a lot of attention to those points of, you know, these punctuation points, one of the things we can experience is that the movement becomes quite kind of almost mechanical, quite abrupt. Because we're putting a hard, fast line there in a way, which obviously is not how we want to do the movements. But what happens is it's quite a natural process that actually the boundaries, shall we call them, tend to merge. I probably perhaps remember me, some of you saying that this was a bit like cooking. You got all the separate ingredients, you put them in the dish, whatever it is, you apply the heat, and gradually the flavors and even to an extent the textures will blend with each other. That's a very natural process, I think. So if you're feeling, oh, I'm kind of losing the flow, you will get it back. Now 1 foot forwards, transferring your weight. The settling movements, the punctuating aspects of this exercise are some of the most important we will come across. It's very easy to get into sort of forward, backwards, not really paying attention. And one thing we want to try and do is each time we arrive in a leg, just give a moment really to that settling, to aligning ourselves, to letting the center of gravity drop, not rushing on. One thing we can do is using our breath. You say, sink your weight back. You rest there. And imagine you can breathe up through your leg and breathe out through your leg. And it's on the out breath stage that you would really get that sense of settling. And then go forwards and do the same thing. Now, this is obviously not how we end up doing the exercise. There isn't a lengthy chords. But what it does do is it has a very practical element. It really helps us to get that alignment and that root, and that stability over one leg. Once we know what we're looking for, it's quite a short process. And in fact, not only is it short, but you don't really notice it. I mean, you wouldn't notice somebody doing it. I'm still allowing that space, that time, but it's very short. And I can feel it, but unless you're really looking for it, you wouldn't notice it. And again, if you are doing, say, for instance, the thing about the breathing, if you use a bit of support, actually, you could just rest there for a little while and play around. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do it? Oh, and when you find those bits that don't work, and maybe you feel a bit wobbly, you've got the support to do it. You can experiment a little bit. This is an important thing to do in your own practice, so that you begin to really feel what's required to get the rooting down, to get the alignment. And when you've got that, that's when you can start to raise your toes and your heel. So when you go forward, the back knee folds in, raising the heel. And when you go back, the hip drops, drawing your toes up. What we want to avoid is losing that alignment. So again, we want to work out how we can do this. How does our body move our foot without it disrupting what's going on in the shoulders? What if you change how you're doing it? And again, use the support to help you with that process, in the same way that a dancer would use the poles around the dance studio to support them while they worked out a particularly intricate thing that they were trying to do, or a difficult thing they were trying to do. And then once you've got that, it just, again, it begins to blend with the overall movement, and so on and so forth. Now, just coming into the stepping. Try on the other side. So the way I've described doing this, use that to support. You might want to rest, breathing in and breathing out, and so on. Another thing that will just stop you rushing a little bit. That, of course, is one of the great benefits of the art, this calmness, this stillness that we associate with it. It's very easy to lose, nice and easy, nice and slowly. And 2 minutes later, you just realise that you're rushing at it again. It's very common to find ourselves speeding up, like walking or running down a hill. You kind of you just accelerate. So again, that recognition of those punctuation points is a really good way of putting the brakes on that a little bit. Raising your toes and your heel. So if it's not working for you at the moment, don't worry. In a sense, I'm going kind of almost too fast, I suppose. We could spend an entire session just on the ramifications of what I'm talking about with this particular exercise. But really, these are suggestions to feed into your own practice. Stepping in. I like the phrase from the old writers in Tai Chi that we should seek the stillness within the movement. Stepping through. And we see from this exercise that when we do look for that stillness, when we do get a sense for that stillness, it actually helps with the movement. And in particular, those tricky movements. So if I haven't got the stillness, this becomes a bit of a stumble. If I've got that stillness, if I've used that idea of a punctuation point, then My stepping is much better. Change direction. So Tai Chi is unusual from an exercise point of view in the sense that it really encourages the use of non-movement, of stillness in one way or another. Okay, have your right foot forward. I'm tempted to say it's the stillness of the mind, but really that then separates out body and mind together. Now, fishermen cast the net. Stillness is an odd term because actually here as I settle, my arms are still moving. The language is difficult to come up with a very precise description, so we use different ideas. It might be that the idea of spaciousness is a better image, or an image that blends with the idea of stillness. It's not just the physical movements that interact with each other. It's the images and the ideas that we use as well. I'll do one more of these, and so it's in that punctuation, as I called it, in that settling, that we turn. The wind blows the willows. And we can combine the turning with the stepping. You may even find that the turning in your hips actually helps with the movement in your foot as well as in your arms. Left foot forward, same thing. First of all, fisherman cast the net. This time when you're in the back leg, turn in. And again, to start off with, it's a little bit lacking in flow. We move the weight, we turn, we move the weight, we turn. But as we become familiar and adept at those individual components, they quite naturally blend and overlap. Having said all of that, it's not easy. That discipline of applying the punctuation, that quietening, that stilling, I think is one of the most difficult things in Tai Chi, as well as one of the most beneficial. Stepping in. And then this time, step in and then through, whichever direction you have space. Dragonfly skims the water. You can just do an ordinary step, or you can raise the foot a little bit. You can raise the foot and rotate your leg at the same time. That's quite tricky. So again, that might be another example of where, rather than just doing it straight away, you might want to practice it on its own. Change in direction. And bring your feet parallel. So go back to your chair. So that last point, it's one thing to do this. It's another to do this. It's a third thing to do this. Because each time we add an action, we potentially throw ourselves offline. So, you might want to say, for instance, well, I can do this. Then what changes? And does it need to change? And we might find that when we go to do this, for instance, we're leaning over a little bit. So our progression in Tai Chi has an aspect of sort of almost being quite finicky about detail. We notice more and more. We recognize more and more changes in the body. And sometimes we come across things that are quite useful, and it's like, oh, that can happen in that way. And other times we think, well, why is this going on? And so we go through a process of analysis and of correction in working out from the analysis. But for now, just coming back, in a way, the whole of this last exercise is a punctuation. It's ending. It's the end of the session. It's the end of the sentence, or however you care to think about it, and it finishes with that sense of the full stop, or however you care to think about it. Embrace tiger, return to the mountain. Just take your time, finish the round that you're on. Your hands come down to rest on your legs. Lovely, and then just open your eyes and we're finished there. Yes, another session that went very quickly. Thank you very much, everybody.